Okay, now we're going to take a look at how we can make this bridge behave like one structure, again using particles, and we want to break it as it's falling. So what I'll do is I'll create a particle system that will kind of wrap this around, and then we're going to see how we can make it behave as a single object. So I'm going to press the 6 key to bring the particle view, and what I'll do is, again, I'll move this aside, and I'll start with the basic particle flow. So with physics particle flow, so what we get is just a grid, and if we press play, this is what we get so far. Since I want that to behave like one structure, I'm going to remove the spin operator. I don't need that. I want that to be more stable. And then I'll take the grid here, and I want that to be kind of the bridge to be made of big chunks. So I will make the grid something like a size of 50, and the shapes here of the cubes, I'll make that something like 30, and then we can change the size of the grid itself. So I'll select it, and I'll move it up so that it's kind of around the bridge here. And while the grid is selected, I can change its width. So we're going to kind of go with width of 4, something like that, and we're going to center it like this, and then we're going to extend the length so that it fills the whole space, and maybe one more, something like this, actually one less. Here we go, and we're just going to place it like so in the middle of the row. So now that we've got our shape, the basic shape, and I'll make sure that it's really the grid brings the particles right there in the middle. So that's pretty much that's it. So I don't need the bridge anymore. So what I'll do is I'll just hide the road, and we'll focus on the particles themselves. And I'll go in wireframe mode, and you'll see why in a few minutes. So those are the particles we have so far. Let me change their color so that we can identify more clearly what we're doing. And move this aside, and if I press play, they fall down, and that's what we got. And they're not really connected to each other. They're just going to fall all independently. In order to have these particles connected with each other, what we can do is we can use an operator here called the MP glue. So it's that stands for mass or M particles glue. And I'll bring it below the world, and the glue allows us to connect particles together. So what I'll do is I'll base it on their distance. They're now, the grid was set to a size of 50, so there's between the pivot point of each particle, so there's about 50 units. So what we'll do is we'll set the MP glue to a value above 50, so the distance, the bind distance will be above 50. And in order to see that, I'm just going to turn on visualization, and I'm going to make it so that it's very obvious, so something like yellow. And now if we bring up the value here, and actually I'm going to bring it to something like 50, and if I climb it up here, you'll see that it's going to start to make those connections and bindings. Right now the maximum binding is set to 4, so if I set it to 8, you'll see that they're going to start to connect with each other. I'll make a value here of 90, which means that every other particle will not be connected to each other. It's going to be only the particles that are within close range. So now that we've got that, if I just press play, we'll see that they're going to behave as one, and it's pretty much the same thing, but now you said the bindings are kind of connecting them together so that it's a bit more tight. So now that we've got this going, we'd like to attach the bridge to the side here. So what I've done is I've created a few objects that I called anchor, and they're just boxes that I've put at the end of the bridge here, and they're on the other side there as well. So what I'll do is I'll bring back particle flow, and I'll select those boxes. I'll just select one of them and then say select similar. It's going to select all of the others. And what I'll do is I'll copy this event, and I'll paste it as an instance. Instead of using a grid, actually I don't need the glue anymore, so I'm just going to turn off this one. I want to simulate on cube, so that's good. Then that's good. So the birth grid here, we're going to replace that by a birth group, which allows me to pick any object in the scene. And what I'll do is I'll use the currently selected. Those are the anchors, and I'll hide the original ones. And right now we don't see them in the viewport because it's not connected to the render output, so that was going to connect it there. And now you see that we see the anchor points there. The anchor points are kind of big because the shape is exactly the same as the rest of the bridge, so I'm going to make that unique, this shape operator unique, and I'm going to reduce the size. All we want is those particles to be anchor points for the rest of the bridge. And I'll go on the other side to make sure that they don't intersect, and they don't intersect. That's perfect. So now these particles, if I press play, they're just going to fall down, which is exactly what we expect. They're based in an event. Sorry, they're based in an event that is physically based, so they're just going to fall down. But if I want them in the simulation, I want them to be taken into account in the simulation, but I don't want them to move. So what I'll do is I'll go use a special operator called the MP switch, and the MP switch, what it allows you to do is to take regular speed and position operator of particle flow and blend them with particle mass effect simulation of particles. So it's kind of if you do an effect that goes with effect driven particles that change it to something very specific, and then you want to slowly move into a physically based simulation, you use the MP switch for that so that it brings in the simulation. But right now what I can do is I can say turn off the simulation, and instead of animating the being off during only a certain interval or moving in or kind of blending in and blending out, I'll say just turn off the simulation in the current event for this one. So now if I press play, you'll see that these anchor points, these particles there, they're just staying where they are. But now what we can do is I'm going to grab the glue operator, glue number 1, and I'm just going to copy it. And I'm going to paste it, and this one here, glue number 2, we're going to connect the particles to this other event here. Right now the glue again is based on distance. I'm going to change the color of this binding to something like red, something like that. You see that now it's kind of doubling the oops, my mouse went something like that. Okay, anyway, so the red here will be for the other. So what I'll do is I'll say I want to only connect to one particle, just one. And you see that we see that there. But what I'll do is here, instead of saying bind with current event, I'll say turn that off. I'll say bind with other events, and I'll pick event number 2, which means that the particles in event number 1 will be connected to the ones in event number 2. So that's what's happening here. You see that the red lines represent the second glue, and the yellow line represents the first glue. So you see that they're attached at the end there. So if I just close this down for now and take a look at what we have, what we're going to get is something that goes like this, where the bridge is going to fall down and it's going to be attached to the end here. So if I go back to shaded view, this is what we get, and it behaves pretty much like a rope or like a soft body. All the particles are kind of bound together by this glue operator. Then you can change the physics structure of this, or the rigidity of it, by going to the glue operator and say, right now, it's allowed to stretch to 120%. So what I'll say, go back to maybe 100%. So it's going to try to hold together. So if I just move this aside and press play, you'll see that the bridge will try to hold it a bit more together, and it's going to be less prone to lose its shape. Of course, you can change these and can make them more rigid by playing with the spring force and make them a bit more strong. But right now, I'm going to leave it to 100%, which is good. This is kind of if it's a concrete bridge, it's going to try to stay within that 100%. But what you can do as well is at the bottom here, there's a breakability. You can say break by overstretch. Also, there's another one here at the top, says breakable by force. Right now there's not a lot of force in there, or there are forces, but I can say don't use that. I want to break by overstretch. Force will be good if you have an external force that comes in, or if you want to, whenever there's a collision, things like that, you can make breakability by force. But right now what I want to do is whenever there's an overstretch, I want that thing to break. Now 150 is way too much. I'll say 105. We'll see what we get, and I'll press play. And what we're going to get is that 105, none of them go beyond 105, so we don't get any breaking. So if I go back here and say 102, we'll see something like that. Press play, and some of them at the middle will break, but let's go back at 101 because it's pretty rigid there. So rewind this and play, and we're going to see if something there breaks. Okay, here we go. It breaks. So it breaks at a very specific point there, which is good. That's perfect. But what I can do with this is, let's say I want this to break somewhere else, or I want it to break into very specific points. So to do that, there's a special operator, and it's called a solvent. And solvent, it's here. So I'm going to bring in the solvent here, and the solvent right now it's set. You can set it up by time, you can set it up by a list, or you can just dissolve everything at this point. But you can also say limited by an icon, and the icon now is very small, so I'm going to make it a bit bigger. But the icon here is that specific icon over there. I'm going to make it a bit bigger, something like this. And if I do rotate it and I move it aside, something like that, you'll see that as I press play, as soon as it goes through here, the solvent will break it. And of course I can animate that. So if I turn on auto key, I can say, well, it's going to cut here, but then I want to cut a few more, so I'm going to animate this like so. So what's going to happen now is that as it moves in, actually, you know what, I'm just going to grab this key and copy it over here, and now we're going to get it's cutting there, and then after that it moves and all of these particles here are separated. And of course I can grab this this solvent here and say, well, I don't want to have it animated. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to bring it somewhere like here, so it's going to represent pillar number 1. I'm going to rotate it something like that, maybe bring it down like this, and I'll, in the particle flow window, I'll just say copy this one and then paste it, and my solvent number 2 is going to be here. So I'm going to grab it in the viewport, move it aside here, and now what we're going to get is something like this, where both of them will break, and they're going to break exactly where we want them to break by using the solvent operator. And of course here they're not overstretching anymore because the weight is different on this side over there. You can also make it break in diagonal. So if I just go this and rotate this a little bit, something like that, and maybe rotate this one like so, now you're going to get something that's going to break a bit less straight, and it's going to give you a nice breaking pattern over there as well. So all of these are possibilities that you can play with until you get the effect that you want. But you see that here, the bridge here, when it breaks, I'd like to add some debris. Same technique as we did before. We want to add little details as it breaks into specific points. So what I'll do is I'll grab this event, I'll say copy, and then I'll paste it as an instance. I don't need the grid, so I'll delete that. The glue operator, I don't need them because it's going to be, and I don't need a solvent, and I don't need the solvent. So in this event, in this specific event, whenever the yellow binding breaks, I'm just going to connect that here. I want them to continue to simulate, and with the MP shape and the world and all of this as a continuum, as a continuous flow. So if I just press play, you see that nothing has changed. It's continuing to animate. But now what I'll do is I'll say, whenever that glue operator tests true, and you have to turn it on. So that's very important. So test true when particle any binding breaks. So whenever it breaks, it goes to that second event here. I'll press play, and you'll see that it continues like so. And actually, you know what? Press. So that's good. And did we break the solvent here? So press play, and we're going to get something like that. Test true when bind, break, all binding or bind break. So that's what we want. Here we go. So, whoops, press play. Here we go. So now what we get is we get a cut, and we get the particles to continue to simulate. Whoops, that's not what I want. I want to break any binding. Let me pause for a second. I'm not getting the result that I expected. All right, for some reason, I don't know why, but I put a solvent here, and now it's fine. It seems that when I connected the glue here, when it's branching out and it's testing true, it's kind of reconnecting it. So maybe there's something I missed there, or something I did that anyway. But what I did now is that whenever there's a binding that breaks, it goes out here, and I put a solvent to make sure that it remains unglued or solved, I would say. So what we get there, something like this, and we get our simulation right. But what I want to do there is I don't want to, this part is not really what I'm concerned about. What I would like to do is to emit particles as it breaks. So what I'll do here is I'll bring in a spawn operator, and I'll just drop it in somewhere here. And the spawn, I will spawn once, maybe 150 particles. Again, we're going to add some variations in there. The speed here, we're going to make it to 150% with a variation of 80%. Divergence, we're going to make it 80% or 80 degrees. And now we should get something where every time there's a binding, there's a particle that breaks. Oh, we're going to emit the same thing. I'm going to spawn something different. Just going to pause it for a second. Pause the playback here. So I rewound the animation. So what we're doing is we're creating some extra physically based particles. So what I'll do here is I'll just bring in a display like we did before, connect that here. So we're going to display something a bit more simple, like lines. And we can turn off, we can do the same thing as we did before as well. I can bring in a delete operator, and the delete operator will delete by particle age, and we'll make it like 30 after 30 frames. So now what we're going to get something like this. If I I press play. When we get the breaking there, we're going to get some little spark of particles. It's actually not very long, so make it 50. And we're going to make the lines here again of that grayish color. And press play. And we get those little particles there. And actually, let's make them a little bit brighter so we can see them. And let them live a bit longer, maybe 100 frames. And rewind and play. And we're going to get those particles there. And of course, I could play with gravity, I could add smoke, I could add all of this like we did in the previous examples. But now what's going to be important is that you see that event number 1 and event number 3 are the events that are related to the bridge. The anchors, we don't want to skin to those, and same thing here with the little things there. So we're going to be very specific about how we want to skin that bridge. So what I'll do is I'll bring in the road again, and I don't need to see the particles. So what I can do is I can turn off the display of them. So I'm going to turn off display, turn off display. I'll do the same thing here with the binding. I'll turn off the visualization of the binding here, turn off the display, but I want to see those here. So what I've got now is what I'll see is only whenever this binding breaks, we're going to add those particles within the scene. But if I grab the bridge, I'll do the same thing as we did before. I'm going to bring in the particle skinner. I'm going to say pick that particle flow system, but now I'm not going to use all particle flow events. I'm only going to use event 1 and event 3. So I'll say here, add by list. It's going to bring up the window. I'll say event 1 and event 3. Select that, and those will be the only particle system that I'll be using. Distance of influence, let's say again something like 50. And we want to rip the surface apart only when there's a binding break. And the binding break, we can find a split precision here. I'm going to make it 98%. It's going to be good, but usually the default value gives you good results. So if I do activate the skinning, so activate the skinning, what we're going to get is something like this, where as it starts to animate, oops, well, maybe did I PFlow event number 1, distance of influence is good, controller limits is good. So let me go back here. I'm going to see if we get our particle to something like that. Okay, so did I activate the skinning? So rewind and activate it again. Press play. Probably 50 here is not enough. Let's make it bigger. Maybe I don't know, 60. And maybe a bigger influence, maybe 5, maybe a bigger fall off. So reactivate the skinning and press play. Okay, let me find out why. All right, so I think my value were not right. I made an absolute here of 50, fall off of 1, and actually turn this off, activate skinning, and if I press play now, what did I do? Oh, I said all particle flow events, activate skinning. So this seems to work, but that's not exactly what I want. So I want to bind break. So let's say whenever I've got a binding break, I want to break it. So we set 98%. So something is weird here. So I'm going to press play and let it break again. See if it's going to break. As it breaks into pieces there. Actually, you know what? I forgot to unactivate and reactivate and press play. And now we should get something that's very close to what we're going to get. And actually, you know what? Something that I could do that would give me good results as well. I'm going to turn off activate skinning. Before I do put the particle skinner, I'll put the quadrify or the quadrify mesh. And it's going to give me a bit more details onto the geometry. Right now it's set to 4%. Let's say set it to 2%. So we're going to have a bit more vertices to play with. It's like the skin modifier. The more vertices you have, the better particle skinning you're going to get. I'm going to activate the skinning now. And for some reason, I don't know why I have to leave this on, all the particle flow events, but I'll figure that out a bit later. But now what we're going to get is the effect that we want. It's going to start to deform. As you can see, it's a bit slower because it needs to dynamically break this system. So I'll let it play for a second until we get to the point. So that's pretty much it until it breaks. So we're going to let it break so we can see it break dynamically. And we see there that it's here we can see it pretty clearly that it breaks where we wanted it to break. Same thing here. Just going to pause the animation here, and you see that it breaks over there and it breaks over there as well, and you get the result that you want. Of course, you could put a cap modifier here if you want this to be capped. That could be a good idea as well. But all of these things will be giving you a good result for simulation. So just to give you an idea of how it looks like when it's done, I've prepared this before. So I'm just going to go back to my previews, and I did the road here. So I'm going to show you the viewport preview that I've prepared. And I've kind of selected the point of view there of the camera, and you can see where it breaks. And as it comes on the ground, there's break as well, and you get these this effect. All right, so play this. This is kind of what we get. Sorry about the little confusion there, but that's pretty much the workflow, and you're going to get pretty good results out of that with the particle skinner and with the binding break. Whenever there's a binding break here in the particle skinner, you're going to break the structure into multiple pieces.